thanks so much. I do just want to let everyone know we will be recording the event at the top. And this will eventually go onto the GW4 YouTube channel. If you do have any questions for our keynote or at all during the event, there is a Q&A that you can submit that for. And then also, I think you are allowed to actually unmic. We've been very lax and free with that. So if you prefer to ask your question via the mic, you're welcome to do that when we take questions. The structure of the day is going to be pretty much about an hour to hear from our speakers and our keynote, Marcus. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll get on to all of the wonderful video submissions from our shortlisted folks, and then the announcement of who's been awarded the prize. So that's the schedule. And I'm going to hand it over to Julie Barnett, who is going to be our host for today.
Okay, thanks, Al, very much. Hello, everyone. I'm Julie Barnett. I'm Associate Pro-Vice Chancellor of Research at the University of Bath. So here at the university, we're delighted to be hosting this Open Research Prize Award events, and that the prize this year is being delivered in partnership with University of Bath Library Services and indeed the GW4 libraries. So just a bit of background, the Open Research Prize was first introduced by the University of Bristol in 2021, and it's designed to celebrate and recognise the excellent work of researchers in making their research more accessible to all, and by doing so to increase its potential impact. So the prize awards event is, as Al's already alluded to, is part of the GW4 Open Research Week, which is celebrating best practices in open research, practices which make research more accessible, more transparent, reproducible and visible. And the theme for this year is Open Research, Open Culture. This theme is very resonant here at Bath and at many other universities too, of course, given the challenge and the subsequent commitment we've made to explicitly attend to our research culture and to identify the actions we need to take to improve it. Open research is one of the pillars of research culture here at the University of Bath, and in keeping, again, with colleagues at many other universities, I know we've been identifying actions to embed open research, not simply in our research practices, but in the other signals we have about the things that we value. So specifically here, I'm thinking about our recruitment practices and our promotion practices as an example of the whereabouts we're trying to embed a recognition of the importance of open research. Another indicator of this openness, specifically relating to this event, is that we're really wishing to acknowledge the contributions of our technical staff and our research support staff, professional services staff, who are enable our research practices. Fantastic. So before we get to the award of the prizes a little later this afternoon, as Al's explained, I'm really very pleased to be able to first introduce Dr. Jo Jenkinson from GW4, and in a short while our keynote speaker today, Professor Marcus Manafo. And for different reasons which will become clear, it's really fantastic and really fitting that they're both able to be with us today. So by way of introduction to Jo, as many of you will know, Dr. Jo Jenkinson is the director of the GW4 Alliance. That's a collaborative research alliance of 4 of the most research intensive and innovative universities in the UK, that is Bath, Bristol, Cardiff and Exeter. Collaboration is absolutely at the heart of the alliance, and that's about making the GW4 institutions greater together, better together than the sum of their parts. Prior to taking on the role of GW4 Director, Jo was Head of Infection and Immunity at the Medical Research Council, part of UK Research, UKRI, where she led the UKRI Department for Health and Social Care, NIHR, Rapid Response and Rolling Calls for COVID-19 research. And she worked for the MRC for 13 years and held a whole range of roles during that time, including Head of Capacity and Skills. For the last 4 years, Jo has done a fantastic job leading and managing the GW4 Alliance and developing and delivering its overall strategy. She'll be moving on to a new role shortly, and so this is a great opportunity as part of the event today to offer all of our thanks and our best wishes from the GW4 Open Research community. So Jo, we're really happy that you're with us today, and it's great to introduce you, and we look forward to what you have to say to us now. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm really pleased to be with you all today for this second cross-institutional GW4 Open Research Prize Awards event. As you heard, this year led by colleagues at Bath. And I'd really like to start by thanking colleagues in Bath Library Services and the wider GW4 Open Research Week for organising this year's event. And as part of a kind of fantastic week lineup, it's really exciting to see the kind of growth in this event. And very exciting when I was on campus at Bath a couple of weeks ago to see all the pillars around campus advertising this event and GW4 logo plastered everywhere. GW4 Open Research Week really does offer a unique opportunity to unite our academic and professional services communities alongside all of the external institutions and the public who are joining the events this week to explore but also showcase the pioneering approaches to open research and the best practice that's already happening within the institutions and bring that to light. At GW4, as Julie said, we work with other universities, with businesses and civic bodies, acting as the anchor institutions to support a knowledge-intensive economy. And collaboration, transparency and innovation are completely central to our mission and at the heart of what we do. So we're really delighted to be able to support the prizes today that help promote best practice in open research across our institutions. And to support this further, today we've actually advertised, sorry for the plug, a new research culture role within the team as well. So across the Alliance, all 4 institutions have a strong commitment to embedding the principles and practices of open research to improve research integrity and the quality of outputs and really improve the public value of research by making it more easily accessible to all and maximising its potential impact. At an institutional level, open research is one of the kind of 6 pillars of the University of Bath's Research Culture Action Plan, and the university is fully committed to embedding open research across all studies and research outputs. At Bristol, there's a newly adopted open research policy with a sub-policy on open access, including scholarly works, which mandates making research publications open access. The university provides infrastructure and support to help researchers make their work open access. Research integrity, ethics and open research are a critical part of the Cardiff University's vision. We support offered to support researchers to produce open access research, and I've just come out of a meeting of their Ignite Welcome funded project, which is doing some really exciting work in this space. And then within the University of Exeter strategy for 2030, the university are completely committed to research excellence being underpinned and enhanced by an open, ethical and supported research culture and environment. We at GW4 are also undertaking a number of initiatives to support open research, as you know, this week and prize, alongside the joint rights retention statement that's been driven through the library teams, which advocates for greater measures to support researchers to retain the rights to their work. And all 4 of our institutions are also members of the UK Reproducibility Network, which promotes integrity, reproducibility and open science. So in conclusion, this is just a really fantastic opportunity to leverage the skills and expertise we have across the institutions and bring together people and celebrate the examples of best practice, showcase some of the inspiring research that's taking place. And we were absolutely delighted to see so many outstanding entries to this year's prize. I know, thank you to the judges who faced a huge challenge to shortlist just 4 entries in each categories. And I'm really looking forward this afternoon to hearing from them, exploring those projects in a bit more detail. And thank you all for being here today, but also for your commitment to this issue, which is absolutely foundational to great and impactful research. Thank you, Julie.
Okay. Thanks, Jo. That was great. Thank you again, and again, just every good wish for your new role from the GW4 Open Research community.
Thank you.
Okay. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for today. I can't see Marcus, but I'm believing for the best. Oh yes, I can see Marcus. Hello. So it's my pleasure to introduce Marcus. Marcus is Professor of Biological Psychology and MRC investigator, and is currently Associate Pro-Vice Chancellor of Research Culture at the University of Bristol. Very many of you will know that Marcus has long been interested in, committed to the factors that influence research quality and the design and implementation of approaches at various levels of the research system that can improve research quality. And it was this interest that led to him co-founding, very well known now, the UK Reproducibility Network, UKRN, and currently Marcus is chair of the UKRN Supervisory Board. Among many other initiatives in this area, Marcus has led the development of the trainer programs for open research practices that numerous institutions have taken part in and indeed have embedded within their practice. And of course, it's a very particular pleasure to welcome Marcus as the keynote speaker today at the University of Bath, as in just less than a month now, Marcus will be joining the university as our new Deputy Vice-Chancellor and Provost. Marcus, we're delighted you've agreed to give our keynote today. We'll have some time for questions after your talk, but for now, welcome and over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you for that introduction. I am having the usual technical glitches of not being able to get my screen to share properly. So I'm not quite sure what to do about
We
that.
can see your diary.
Say again?
We can see your diary, Marcus.
Yeah, quite. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
But
okay.
not in presenter view.
Right. Well, that was the problem I was having earlier, and I couldn't get it out of this view. Not quite sure how to do that. Any ideas? This has not happened to me before. Let me stop sharing and try to share a different screen. The joys of technology updates. Okay, I think I know how to do this, but it's going to be tricky to do it. Let's share that screen and then do this. How does that look?
Looks good.
It looks good. It's sort of small, but
is it small?
It's small to me. I don't know if anyone else can see that.
It's workably small or
yeah,
unworkably small?
I would say so. Yeah.
You can also zoom in on your individual screen.
All right. Okay. So we can all do some zooming. So you're good, Marcus, I think.
I mean, to be honest, I am like any academic using my PowerPoint slides as a crutch, but it's what I'm going to be saying that's hopefully more interesting. So let's make the most of it. Sorry, my technology is falling over at the moment. As Julie said, I'm sort of between institutions, so I've studiously avoided using one institution's now it's not advancing slides over another. So instead, I'm using UK Reproducibility Network slides because all GW4 institutions are part of the UK Reproducibility Network. So that feels like a nice neutral thing to do. But one of the challenges that moving between institutions has created is that I now have a Bath login and a Bristol login, and both use Microsoft systems. And when I try and log into both on the same computer, a fight breaks out and something falls over. So I think that's probably at the heart of my technical challenges. I promise you I'm more professional than this normally. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about my technical woes. I'm here to talk about open research and why it matters. I'm going to start with a brief pitch for the UK Reproducibility Network. Hopefully I'm preaching to the converted in the sense that all 4 GW4 institutions, as I say, are institutional members and have very active local networks, and some are part of our ongoing open research program. If you're not aware, the UK Reproducibility Network is a peer-led network of networks comprising local networks that are grassroots communities of practice that bring together researchers and research enablers to run journal clubs and seminar series and advocate for change from the ground up, if you like. Institutional members that have appointed a senior academic or sometimes professional services colleague to sit at the senior management level and focus on issues of incentives, training, hiring and promotion criteria, that kind of thing. And then stakeholder organizations who are the funders, the publishers and the learned societies. And so we attempt to facilitate collaboration and coordination within and between those three main constituent parts. And our focus is very much on the research process. There are lots of actors in this space, the UK Research Integrity Office, the UK Committee on Research Integrity, the individual funders, institutions themselves, and there are different facets to research integrity around professional behaviours, managing risks, and the research process itself, and that's all situated within the wider research culture landscape. But a few years ago, in the context of biomedical and life sciences research, we talked about how if you can focus on the research process, drawing on analogies from other sectors such as manufacturing, and get the quality control right throughout the process, then the end result of that process will be high quality because the process is high quality. And one of the reasons why we as UKRN focus on open research is that that transparency allows for greater scrutiny, more error detection and error correction, and facilitates the improvement of the process in a way that can't be achieved by simply peer reviewing the monograph or the paper that comes out at the end of the process. And this is, again, drawing on the insights of W. Edwards Deming, the statistician who took the concept of quality control throughout a manufacturing process to the Japanese automobile industry and transformed it not just in terms of the quality of what it produced, but also the productivity of that sector. Because by creating a process that produces high quality outputs, you are less wasteful, you focus less effort on blind alleys, you correct errors more rapidly. And if that analogy holds, then by applying our focus to the research process and optimizing the research process rather than simply applying quality control through peer review at the end of the process, then not only will we produce higher quality research outputs, but we will also more rapidly translate that knowledge into societal benefit. And how that's done will, of course, need to be informed by the different epistemological norms of different disciplines, and that's still a work in progress, I think. But open research is very much central to that effort to improve the research process. So for that reason, we've produced these primers that many of you will be familiar with in terms of providing resources for researchers themselves to engage in a variety of different open research processes, working with supranational stakeholders like UNESCO, for example, to make sure that this is done in a way that joins up with other international and supranational organizations. And we now have reproducibility networks at over 20 different countries and regions. A few months ago, I was in Ukraine for the launch of their reproducibility network. And I think what that allows me to say is that if Ukraine can do it, then pretty much anyone should be able to do it at the moment. And we're also working within the UK sector on how we can support researchers so that their open research efforts are recognized and rewarded. And of course, the Open Research Prize is very much part of that attempt to recognize and reward the sorts of practices that will support that focus on the research process. But that's all well and good. Hopefully nothing I've said will lead to major disagreements by anyone on this call, but almost by definition, the people who are here today are the ones who don't need that value of open research to be articulated to them. We need to be able to bring into the conversation and bring into the room those for whom this feels like just another thing to do in an environment where we already have lots of things to do. We have workload pressures, we have bureaucratic inefficiencies, we have all kinds of issues that are weighing on the sector more generally, related to the financial pressures, related to the kinds of contracts that people are on and the extent to which that creates a sense of not being in control of their own destiny and all of that flows from that. So how can we talk about open research, not just in terms of why we should be doing it, but in terms of what it can do for us as individual researchers, as research groups, as institutions? What are the benefits to us? So that's what I want to spend the next 10 or 15 minutes talking about. The moral, the pragmatic, and the selfish reasons for working in a more transparent way, and the ways in which we can then use those arguments to tell stories to create narratives around the value of open research beyond any one of those, so that we have ways of convincing different people that this is not just something that we should do because it's going to be part of the next REF or because funders require it, not something that we should do just because it's the right thing to do because we're publicly funded, but because there are also benefits to ourselves in terms of the quality of our work, in terms of the efficiencies with which we work, in terms of the opportunities that it opens up for all of us. So I'm going to touch on all of those, and then hopefully there'll be time at the end for any questions that there might be around how we can do that in a way that will land well across our different communities, the researchers, the research enablers, across different career stages, across different disciplines, and so on. So one of the starting points, as I mentioned, is that there is a moral argument for open research that flows from the fact that much of what we do, directly or indirectly, is publicly funded or supported by charitable donations. And therefore, the people who are underwriting our activity as academics should be able to access as much as is reasonable that which we produce, because universities are very much in service of society, and researchers and the research that they do should be, to a degree at least, in service of society. We are, and it's easy to lose sight of this in a sector that's struggling and where we have all of these workload demands. We are, as researchers, research enablers, academics, extraordinarily privileged to be in a job where we can get paid to do stuff that we personally find interesting, particularly if we can convince others to provide us with a bit of funding to do that research. So it's the least that society can ask, that we make as much of what we produce through that privileged position as widely available as possible. And this is where the moral argument comes from. It's where funder mandates for things like data sharing come from, as well as the fact that that transparency can fuel innovation and other ways in which those open research outputs can be implemented in different contexts, many of which we may not be aware of yet, because someone 10 years down the line might come up with an idea for how to use the data that have been collected in a way that we can't conceive of at this point in time. And the example that's always used is of the weather logs that we kept by captains on ships in the British Navy that were sailing around the world 200 years ago, that has now been incredibly important in terms of mapping climate change over the last 2 centuries. No one at that point, when the data were being collected, would have had any idea that those data would have been useful in that way 200 years later. So what can we do to ensure that the work that we do is embedded in that civic mission that all universities have now and can be linked to that societal benefit that I've talked about, not necessarily in ways that are directly the result of the research itself, but make use of the transparency that we can bring into the research process. So one example is thinking about other parts of society that could make use of these resources in, for example, pedagogy. So A-level psychology is currently the most popular A-level subject. Psychology is also a discipline that is quite far along the open research journey, with relatively embedded norms around pre-registration, sharing of materials, data, code, and so on. All of those intermediate research objects can help to bring to life the subject that is being studied by A-level students in secondary schools that typically are close to a university where that kind of research is happening. So we have a project going on at the moment where we're working with, I think, 6 different schools, state and private, in the Bristol area, around how we can make use of some of the open research outputs that we've been generating over the last 10 years in the research group that I'm still for the next 4 weeks part of in Bristol. And it's not just the data and code that the teachers tell us will be useful for them. It's the study protocols, the information sheets, the consent forms, as well as the data and code deposits that allow them to have a conversation with students about what informed consent is, for example, and what a good information sheet should contain, and how you obtain consent, and the difference between consent and assent if you're dealing with children, for example, and how that work can lead to downstream interventions informed by upstream discovery research, all in ways that bring the subject to life in a way that's hard to do when you're dealing with historical research or simulated data sets that allow you to run statistical tests but aren't real in a sense. So what we're looking at is how we can take those existing deposits that have already been created and add materials to them that will make them more accessible in the form of a cover sheet, for example, that can create links between the A-level specification and what is contained within the deposit and the study. And of course, the articles that flow from those intermediate research objects will also be open access, so they can access the final article as well. And the teachers say that it would be great to have a cover sheet that is the kind of academic solution to what are the hypothesis names, what is the design, and so on. But they can also have a blank one that they get students to fill in and then compare across the two. And then also a visual abstract. This is a BMJ visual abstract, not one that we've created for one of our research deposits yet, but having a visual abstract on top of it as well will again just make the underlying deposit more accessible, more engaging, and also create an activity that students can engage in themselves in terms of, again, creating their own version of a visual abstract and then comparing that to the version that academics themselves have come up with. So these deposits already exist and they will continue to be generated. With a little bit of additional effort and resource, we can create overlays on these that make them more accessible to those potential end users. But to do that well, we need to be working with those end users and co-producing these overlays. And if we can do that effectively, then in principle, we can create a really strong link between universities and the civic society that they're embedded within, in terms of the schools around them, for example, in this case, but there will be other ways of doing this and other opportunities to leverage those existing resources that we haven't thought of yet, or at least I haven't thought of. And there'll be people out there who hopefully can use this as the stimulus to come up with something else that can be done to maximize the value of these open research outputs, not just to academics and to academia itself, but to wider society. Then there are the pragmatic reasons. So I mentioned earlier that focus on research process and the use of open research as a quality control mechanism is a large part of the motivation behind the UK Reproducibility Network's focus on open research. Again, the insight that Demings had was that if you put spot checks into a process, then if your error rate goes above a certain threshold at some point in the process, you stop the process, you correct the source of the error, and then you restart the process. So you are catching errors earlier in the process. You are better able to identify where the source of error comes in because you have the spot checks throughout the process. And if you get all of that right, then what you end up with at the end of that process is high quality because the process is high quality. And the argument is that that transparency that comes about through open research practices can facilitate that kind of error detection because you are, on the one hand, making your work open to scrutiny in a way that allows others to detect errors. And they may not be errors, they may just be differences in the choices that you could have made at a certain point in the process, and understanding how making a different choice could have changed the end result of that process. But it's all scrutiny, and scrutiny that should lead to improvement if we can take that scrutiny on board, if you like, and adapt to it. But of course, at the same time, knowing that that scrutiny can be brought to bear because you are being transparent in how you work and opening up your process to that scrutiny also creates an incentive for us internally to make sure that our process is really robust. No one wants someone else, for example, to detect an error in how they've worked. Much better to detect that ourselves and catch it before it goes into the public domain. So again, it creates a dual incentive or a dual quality control mechanism, one external and one internal. And I think that's part of where we can have some very interesting conversations around what that looks like across different disciplines, that idea that you can open up a research process and through that transparency allow for greater scrutiny can be extended beyond simply errors in how things have been done to decisions and choices that have been made, and beyond that, to the lens that we bring to our research, something that is well understood in the arts, humanities, and social sciences, perhaps less well understood in the life and biomedical sciences and in STEM disciplines, that the perspective that we bring to our work shapes our work and therefore shapes the end product of our research. And that understanding that positionality and being transparent about it is part of open research and part of the transparency that can lead to greater quality. Which all sounds great, but does it work in practice? Well, here is a personally slightly embarrassing example of how it can work in practice. This is an email that I received from a master's student at the University of Glasgow. This student had been set the task of identifying a data set, downloading it, running the code, and seeing whether or not the results look the same as in the published paper, and using those data to then explore secondary questions that they could generate from that data set. So a great pedagogic use of open research assets, not dissimilar to the one that I was talking about in schools, but here in higher education in an MSc course. And this student spotted an error. Now, this was a deposit from several years ago that we thought was fine. And it turns out that there was indeed an error. And that fresh set of eyes that had been able to scrutinize the deposit detected it, facilitated by the kind of background pedagogy that led to this in the first place. Fortunately, the error was a relatively minor one. It was an error in the data dictionary. One of the variables had been flipped, and that meant that the manuscript itself was fine, the data was fine, the code was fine. It was just the data dictionary that had the error in it. But as a result of that error being detected, we were able to correct the error. We were able to create a new deposit with the error corrected, and we were transparent about that. If you went to the original deposit, there would be a note saying it's been replaced by this deposit because an error was found. Then you go to the new deposit and it says this deposit replaces this earlier deposit because an error was found. Now, no one likes, as I said before, errors to be detected by someone else, but better that the error is detected, better for our scholarship, better for those that fund our scholarship, that we correct those errors, learn from them, try to ensure they don't happen again, but also recognize that in any human endeavor, there's going to be honest error. We will have all read articles, for example, that have been read by multiple authors, read by reviewers, read by editors, proofread, copy edited, and there are still typos in them. Because however much you put in place checks, honest errors will still creep through. We should learn from them, and we should recognize that they're not an inherent flaw in the system, but just an inevitable consequence of any human endeavor. And we should correct them when we identify them. And all of that will help us do better research if we can embrace it and if we can be willing to learn from the errors when they're detected. And then finally, the selfish reasons. We know that for open research outputs to be reusable, they need to be well curated. They need to be put together so that anybody can download the deposit, the data and code, for example, and make sense of them through good metadata, a README file that describes what is in the deposit, a data dictionary, hopefully without any errors in it, any other relevant material. This needs to be done in a way that is that makes use of non-proprietary formats. All of this is obvious, but if you go to platforms like the Open Science Framework, which is great, but uncurated, it's a bit of a Wild West. There's lots of stuff on there that's in proprietary formats that you can't download, lacks a data dictionary, lacks a README file, so you can't actually make use of it. So good open research practices require you to work in a certain way. But of course, working in that way then means that you yourself can go back to your data, your code, whatever it might be, years later and make sense of it in a way that would be much harder if you hadn't curated it properly. I have several academic colleagues who hold all of this stuff in their head and can only make sense of their own data and code if they remember how it was put together, why it was put together. And that becomes increasingly hard the further out from it you get. And we also know that open research outputs allow for much more granular recognition of individual contributions. We're now well beyond, in most disciplines, the era of single author papers and single scholars conducting an entire program of research and writing it up all by themselves. We now work in teams, quite large teams, multidisciplinary teams, and the individual contributions of members of those teams can easily be lost when we use conventions like authorship to reflect contributions, because what does it mean to be third or fourth or fifth author on a 20-author paper with 3 different studies in it, for example? If we include the intermediate research outputs as part of what we cite within the paper and recognize as outputs in their own right, by using repositories that assign a DOI to those individual constituent parts, we can cite those individual constituent parts, we can include them in separate sections in CVs, preprints, data sets, study protocols, all of which are evidence of your research output. These are all tangible products of your efforts that you can point to and say, I made this contribution, I generated the data set that's contributed to study 2, for example, which supports more granular approaches to recognition like contributorship statements, and is only going to become more valuable as we move into an increasing team science ethos embedded across a range of different ways of working. But I think the key selfish reason to work in these ways is that first one that I mentioned, that it simply creates, if we really need to convince busy people that working in this way will benefit them, it's that it creates efficiencies within your own research, within your own research group, in terms of being able to understand what you did 6 years ago, in terms of being able to onboard new researchers in a way that allows them to understand what's been done in your group and how it's been done in the past. If we can drive up standards across the sector so that this is being done in a comparable way across different institutions, then when people move between institutions, things will be done in a broadly similar way in those different places. The quote that I always use in this context is, your most important collaborator is yourself from 6 months ago, and that person doesn't answer emails, a quote many of you will have heard, but I think it's really on point, because if we can get people to work in the ways that are necessary to do open research well, then there will be a feedback loop to the efficiency and effectiveness of that research program itself, in terms of being able to understand what you've done before, in terms of being able to onboard people as well. And that ultimately is where we need to get to. The challenge is that in a world where people are busy, overloaded, and there's a lot of bureaucracy already, that feels like a lot of effort to get out of the local minimum we're in at the moment and into a new way of working that is more efficient. But we need to be able to tell the story of how that will benefit people themselves, so that we can convert those that are maybe skeptical of the value of open research, and then help them on the journey to get to that new way of working by providing the resources and providing the incentives that make it easy to do. So ultimately, we all know that open research is valuable. I think it's valuable in perhaps many more ways than we might immediately think of, and different people will focus on different aspects of what I've talked about naturally, but understanding that breadth of value that can flow from open research practices, and being able to tell different stories about those different aspects, so that we have a story to tell to whoever we're talking to in terms of convincing them of the value of this way of working. That ultimately is the way in which we're going to be able to really move the needle on all of this in a way that will genuinely, I think, not just benefit individuals, but benefit the whole sector. I'll stop sharing then.
Okay,
hopefully you can see all of that.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you, Marcus, very much. We've got some time to open up the floor to questions. I'm sure library colleagues will shout if they see someone putting up a hand that I don't see, or indeed putting something in the chat. While people are thinking of their questions, perhaps I can ask you something, Marcus, which is to say, what opposition do you hear, if at all, to open research practices now? So we were to think the arguments you hear against it and how you would counter those. Maybe you don't hear them now so much as it is entering practice, but could you just say something about that?
I mean, I do hear them, and I've heard them over the years, and I am hearing fewer now than I heard 10 years ago, I guess, when I started really talking about this stuff. which is encouraging, I guess, or people have just decided not to bother with that stuff because they know they'll get, they'll get a response. The pushback falls into two broad categories that I guess you could think of as sort of valid and invalid, but a kind of way of putting it is understandable versus based on misconceptions. So there are understandable concerns around the fact that it's not always appropriate to share everything completely openly. And I think it's unhelpful to talk about open research without caveating it to say as open as possible, as close as necessary, to talk about fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. You don't need to be fully open to be transparent, if that makes sense. And you should be as transparent as possible. I think that in itself is quite a valuable guiding principle that we could also then think about how that principle of transparency could be applied to other aspects of how we work beyond just our research outputs. But I think that is understandable, but also based on a misconception that we are talking about making everything fully open. And I think that links to another pushback that I sometimes get, which is that this works for some disciplines, but not for others. And I think we need to be very careful not to implicitly suggest that there is one correct epistemological perspective and that all open research practices should be predicated on that. I think we need to be having a much broader and inclusive conversation around, if we agree that transparency is in principle a good thing, then how can we implement that, and what does that look like across a range of different disciplines, and what can we learn from each other? Which is why I use the example of positionality, for example, which is sort of undergraduate level social sciences 101 if you work in that area, but is actually almost unheard of in biomedical and life sciences. So this is not about one epistemology saying this is how you over there should do things. It's more about how we can create really interesting, actually quite scholarly conversations around what this might look like if we're on the same page in terms of broadly what we want to achieve. And that process of opening up the research process and allowing for scrutiny can include all of that I've just talked about as well. And then the final and most understandable pushback is just the one about being busy. You know, this feels like another thing to do. And again, I think we need to tell a story around what the benefits will be if we can put that effort in, that activation energy to get over the hill, but also then help people to do that by making it easy, by not making it feel like something that you need to do all at once perfectly. Just start small with something, that kind of thing.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Marcus. Questions from colleagues? Jason.
Hello.
You introduce yourself, Jason.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Jason Harper. I'm Head of Library Research Services at the University of Bath. Thank you, Marcus. I found that really insightful and interesting view into open research. I suppose my question is really around how do we get institutions to reward good open research practice, whatever that looks like? You know, how do we incentivize it through reward and recognition as part of that culture change?
Yeah, so I think part of it is by having things like open research prizes, but of course what we need to do is make sure that people who are not already in the fold are coming along to that, particularly people in senior positions who can then start to understand why we do this, the energy that it creates, the value that it generates, all of that kind of stuff. Then we need to be thinking about things like hiring and promotion criteria. You know, many of the incentives within academia are held by universities. So getting those to be aligned with what we want to support, promote, is going to be important. And that's where the OR4 project within the UKRN Open Research Programme comes in. That's all about embedding open research practices in hiring and promotion criteria. And you're starting to see that now across institutions. And more importantly, see that being done in a way that's consistent across institutions, so that what's good for your career at Bath is good for your career at Bristol, is good for your career at Oxford, and so on. And that will be a process, but we're starting to see that happen. We also need funders to start to take this more seriously. They have generally mandates for things like data sharing, but they typically don't enforce them very closely. But we're talking to funders like MRC about how they can just check that people are actually adhering to those mandates more than they currently do, in a way that doesn't create a massive amount of bureaucracy for them. So that will be another incentive. The reason that we were able to move the needle on open access publishing is because the funder said, we're not going to give you the final check if you don't do it. So that's, that's a big lever that's available if we can get the funders to pull on it. And then I think, finally, when it comes to getting senior management to do this, they'll do the easy stuff that doesn't cost much if there are people pushing for it on the ground. But to get them to get really behind this, we need to be able to, again, articulate the benefit to them and to their institution, which at the moment means the financial benefit or an indirect financial benefit. And that's where things like working with civic partners to demonstrate that working in this way can strengthen things that are meant to be important to universities comes in, because I think that's when you get, the VCs, for example, to go, oh yeah, actually it is worth doing that beyond just the moral reason, but because it will improve our ref outcomes, it will make it easier for industry to work with us, it will drive knowledge transfer, it will support our civic mission. Those are the things that are going to get senior management to pay attention.
Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you. Yeah.
Kate, please.
Oh, thank you very much. Following on from what Jason said, apologies. I'm Kate. I'm a research data librarian at University of Bath. Following on from what Jason said, have you observed culture changes in particular areas that have been successful in adopting open research practices, and what was the sort of main impetus behind it? For instance, was it a reproducibility crisis, or was it perhaps that desire for more civic partnerships, and so they tried to make more things open? For those looking to encourage, I suppose, a culture change, where have you seen success in that respect?
So the successes have usually come from reaching a point of realization that much of what a field has been generating is not of particularly high quality, and something needs to be done about that. And psychology is the most recent example. There was the reproducibility crisis narrative. I've never really liked the crisis narrative because it makes it sound like it's sort of time limited and a thing to fix and walk away from. I think it was more that a kind of a moment of realization that actually captures a far broader period of time. But there are other disciplines that have been through a similar process, but decades ago. So particle physics, for example, in the 1950s, went through a very similar process experience. It's one that, because it was in a sort of pre-social media era, is not as well known outside of that particular discipline. But that's what led to the culture of, for example, data sharing and preprints and so on in those disciplines. So I think that's a theme that has emerged across multiple disciplines, and that possibly is a useful starting point to reflect on, actually, is what we're doing high quality enough? Could we make it higher quality? No one would argue that high quality research is better. So if this is a way of supporting high quality research, then we should be doing it. One of the interesting things about that, though, is that those disciplines that adopted some open research practices a long time ago are in some ways now harder to bring on board with the evolving nature of open research, because they feel like they're already doing it. We've been doing this for years. We've done preprints for ages. We've done data sharing for ages. And then you say, well, do you do pre-registration? Oh, no, we don't do that. So, one of the things that we need to be aware of is that this is a moving landscape and we need to move with it. And it's very easy to, again, because it's a lot of work, get yourself to a certain point and think, whoa, blimey, that was hard work, but we're done now. And actually, will never be done. We need to always be kind of reflecting and learning. I'm not aware of any disciplines that have done it for reasons linked to a civic mission or for moral reasons or anything like that. But I think that's where the funders come in. If you look at that UKRI website on open research, it articulates different reasons, including the moral, that this is publicly funded, including the pragmatic, that this will drive innovation and so on. So they're aware of that and they have that lever to bring to bear. But simply including a mandate for data sharing, for example, isn't in and of itself enough, because if no one is checking, people won't do it. So I think the funders need to step up a bit as well.
Okay, thanks again, Marcus. Jo.
Hi, Marcus. You've mentioned the kind of the power of the funders a sort of number of times. So if you were Ottoline later at UKRI, or even Patrick Vallance for the day, what would you change? What would you do first?
I would work with one of the providers that are emerging around open research indicators and ask them to generate an AI tool that was good enough to scrape data availability statements from everything that had a UKRI grant code in it and publish a snapshot across the different research councils of proportion of outputs that have a data availability statement, and leave that to settle for a few years to see whether or not that drove the individual research councils to then enforce their data sharing mandates more effectively, in a way that sort of trickles down, not in a naming and shaming way, but in a kind of healthy competition kind of way.
Okay, that's I'm going to wait to see when that appears then, Marcus. That sounds a great suggestion. Alice.
Hi, Marcus. I'm Alice Mills. I'm the Senior Data Librarian at the University of Bath Library. So yesterday we had a session with a great panel around open research and sensitive data. And we were very lucky to have someone from the data rescue projects in the US join us for that session. And so I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about how open research sort of fits into this new situation where we seem to have hostile sort of political thumbs being pressed on the scale. And certainly we've seen, even closer to home, some worries from some of our colleagues around alterations or deletions of data. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, there is a sort of geopolitical context that we need to work within. And one of the primers on the UKRN website is around trusted research, which is not as in tension with open research as you might think, but is something to bear in mind in terms of what you make transparent and how early on and so on. I think it comes back to that point about as open as possible and as close as necessary, and not being naive about how open we make things or what we make open. But it also comes back to the need for investment in infrastructure, both digital infrastructure and people and teams, to support these efforts, so that you have, for example, repositories that allow for different levels of access. So Bristol's repository, you can be open, restricted, or controlled, and the hoops that you have to jump through to get the data basically go up as you go up through those levels. But at least you can be transparent about the fact that the data exists and there's a kind of brief summary available at every level. And that repository has teams that check the deposits to make sure that they are high quality when they are posted. All of that costs money, which is why you need to get senior management to understand that there is value to this, to the institution, direct and indirect, so that they can justify the business case for investing in that infrastructure. But that's then the way to provide the kind of support to allow for maximum transparency data sharing, even in contexts where there are ethical or commercial sensitivities.
Okay, thanks, Marcus. We've got time for one more quick question, if anyone has one. I don't see one, so I perhaps will ask one final question, Mark, which is to say, would I be right in thinking that although you and colleagues set up UKRN to start with, but actually a lot of the impetus now really comes from staff that are earlier in their careers? I feel like that there's a huge amount of activity that's that sort of bottom-up activity and not just top-down. Would that be your observation, or would you see that differently?
Well, I think UKRN has always been like that, actually. So from the outset, there was this tangible grassroots energy for doing things differently that came from a realization that the quality of the work we were producing was not what it might be, but also a realization that academia was incentivizing the wrong things and the wrong things were being rewarded and so on. So UKRN has always had its community and communities of practice as its foundation. What senior academics like myself and Dorothy Bishop and Malcolm MacLeod and Lara Fortunato and many others did was simply channel that or provide a lightning rod for all of that to kind of cluster around. And that's what we continue to do. So we have brought in institutional leads and stakeholder organization representatives because we're trying to deal with a systems problem. So you need to have all of the elements of that system represented. But I think it's the grassroots community of researchers and research enablers that really provides us with our energy and our legitimacy. And hopefully that will continue.
Okay, that's great. And Naya, sorry, I maybe jumped in too quick then. I saw your hand afterwards.
No, not at all. I was trying to find the button, but your question, Julie, actually links pretty well to what I was going to ask, which is that, yeah, indeed, a lot of the efforts in this area are driven by early career researchers, which is great. But I wondered if you could reflect a little bit more on what the challenges you see coming from more senior management and how you recommend people interact with senior management in a way that sort of is more encouraging. I mean, so for context, I'm an early career researcher and I've only just in the past couple of years gotten to a permanent lecturer position, and the strategies I use to sort of help my early career researchers or PhD students are quite different from the strategies I feel like I need to be effective when talking to senior folks. So do you have any advice on sort of advocating upwards or any of the challenges that you've encountered in doing that? Because you're obviously doing great work in that area.
I mean, there's a lot there, and I don't want to wreck the agenda by talking for ages, but part of the challenge that we face at UKRN is that it would be easy to take advantage of all of that grassroots energy, and people put a lot of effort in effectively unpaid. In fact, one of my favorite passive aggressive mugs is here. We have a real free labor problem in academia, and we need to push back against that. So one of the things we're trying to do is to make sure that many of our local network leads, many of whom are early career researchers, many of whom are doing work that is not workloaded or protected, are recognized for those efforts. We write to pro-vice chancellors and vice chancellors to say this person's doing great work and you should value them. We don't want to lose those people from academia because those are the people, ultimately the change will happen over 20 to 40 years as the people who are currently the grassroots agitators become the vice chancellors. So we want to make sure that we, protect and keep those people in the system, if you like. So a lot of what we do is around empowering people. We have run leadership in academia workshops, for example, that are all about that bring together people across different career stages to make people make people feel like they have more agency and that leadership is a behavior that you can demonstrate at any level, that it's not just about being in a position, if you like. But for that to work well, those people need to also have allies in senior positions, not necessarily at the same university, that are going to mentor them, advise them, watch their back to some extent, because it can be quite exposing to speak truth to power in that kind of way. But I think we're starting to see that kind of shift. It'll be interesting over the next few years as we go through a pinch point in the sector due to the financial challenges, the extent to which senior management continues to sort of react benignly to that challenge. But I think we do need to maintain that culture of challenge because ultimately that's healthy and beneficial for everybody.
Okay, thanks so much, Marcus. So colleagues, we have 10 minutes break now, well, slightly 8 minutes break for a comfort break. Do please come back and then we will get on to the second half of the main business of the day, which is the actual the judging and the presentation of the awards. Thanks again, Marcus. Thanks again, Joe, and we will see you in 10 minutes. just going to wait 1 more minute until 13:41, and then we will recommence. Okay, welcome back, colleagues. We're now moving on to the second part of the afternoon, which is to say that we're now moving on to the section where we actually look at the videos and hear from the judges and look at those that have been successful. So I'm going to hand over to Dr. Kate Button, and who I understand is going to be coordinating the rest of the afternoon for us. Over to you, Kate.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for passing over to me, Julie. So I'm going to be introducing and awarding the prizes for the Open Research Prizes this year. So we had 2 categories of prizes: improving quality and widening reach. And it was a real joy to judge these awards and see just how integral open research practices have become to research across the GW4 Alliance, and the benefits that that brings for research quality and its impact. So let's turn to improving quality. This prize was awarded for demonstrating how the use of open research practices enhance the quality of the conducted research. Applicants were asked to demonstrate their use of open research practices in dissemination of their research findings and outputs, and to articulate and evidence how the adoption of open research methods strengthened their work. In total, we received 17 entries, and overall the standard was truly excellent. It was really inspiring to see the breadth and depth of open research activities across the GW4 Alliance and how these practices were used to facilitate internationally excellent research. So we're going to watch some of the videos from those who were shortlisted for the award, and you will see, I hope, just how impressive in scale, ambition and reach these research projects were. So the shortlistees were Amy Heather from the University of Exeter for their project Improving Reproducibility in Open Healthcare Simulation, Addressing Barriers and Promoting Best Practices. Then we have Cynthia Sosdian from the University of Cardiff for the project My Ocean, Advancing Paleoclimate Science and Inclusivity with Miocene Temperature Data. Then we have Rachel Tunnicliffe from the University of Bristol on the project Open GHG, a community platform for greenhouse gas data science. And finally, Josine Min from the University of Bristol also, and the project was Exploiting the Genetics of DNA Methylation Consortium Infrastructure to uncover the role of DNA methylation in modifying disease risk. So I'm just going to check with Alice whether we're going to watch the first 4 videos first, or whether I'm introducing both prizes.
We're gonna do them in blocks, so we'll do the first 4 videos now, and then we'll have you come back if that's okay, Kate.
Brilliant. So let's watch the first 4 videos then, and then after those videos, I will announce the winner.
Hi, I'm Amy Heather from the University of Exeter, and I'm going to describe our work into improving the reproducibility of healthcare simulation models as part of the STARS project. Our focus in this project was on discrete event simulation models, which are computer models of a system over time, like patients arriving and waiting for a treatment in a clinic, for example. And we can use these models to help understand and test a system under different scenarios. We're interested in the reproducibility of models like this that have been shared. So reproducibility is about whether it's possible to regenerate the reported tables, figures, and results using the shared model code and data that was provided with the article. Why is this important? Well, it helps build trust, confirming that results are reliable and transparent. It also means that others can confidently reuse and adapt these models, with reproducibility verifying that the models are working as expected. And it can also help the original author reuse their model in other projects, or just rerun their analyses in the future too, like after peer review. Reproducibility also encourages using a clear code structure and documentation, helping to reduce errors and ambiguities. Reasons that a model might not be reproducible include missing code, lost parameters, software changes, among other things. And troubleshooting this can be really time-consuming and maybe impossible if the relevant information's been lost. So the aim of this work was to generate a set of actionable recommendations to help improve reproducibility. This could help address some of the known barriers and concerns, like the skills and time required to ensure work is reproducible. So to do this, I attempted to reproduce 8 published discrete event simulation models. These are all in Python and R, and a range of different models. I evaluated the articles and repositories and documented the barriers and facilitators encountered to each of these reproductions. I pre-registered my protocol on Zenodo, and I think this is really important, as when I'm planning research like this, I find I learn a lot from the details that others share in their protocols and articles and use it to inform my own processes. I created a GitHub template, which I used to make the repositories for each of these reproductions. So each repository contained all the information from the reproductions, like the code, logs, records, and they also each generated a Quarto website. So these websites are created with Markdown and embedded code and hosted openly and freely using GitHub pages. And they're a great way of summarizing and sharing the results of the work. So here, for example, we can see the reproduced figures, tables, and also all of the logs I kept whilst doing this work. And yeah, I can just really easily share all this information as it's just a website URL. I also created a repository and Quarto site that summarizes the results from across all of the studies. So again, we sort of have all the information all pulled together here. We have things like lots of different figures. We have things sort of sit behind the article we wrote about the work. So here, for example, this is a figure showing the time it took to reproduce each item from each paper. And then we have the version of that figure that was used in the article written up about the work. And yeah, so these figures here summarize the recommendations we've made. Things like making sure all the code that generates the tables and figures in the article is provided, or the code for the scenarios. And though this focuses specifically on healthcare discrete event simulation, lots of these lessons can also be more widely applicable as well. The work is currently in submission. We have a preprint available, which is great for sharing the work before it's been published. And ongoing work on this project includes developing template models in Python and R, which implement our recommendations to help researchers adopt these practices that we are suggesting. And my work also sits alongside other efforts by my colleagues, including the STARS framework for model reusability and the STRESS framework for replicability. We're also collaborating with journals to look into their reproducibility practices, and we'll be developing training materials with HDR UK to share these practices more widely. I'd like to thank my colleagues, Tom, Alison, Nav, and Andy for their supervision, support, and involvement. And I'd also like to thank the authors of the 8 articles that were used in this research, who shared their code freely and openly, which enabled this work to take place and truly highlights the value of working openly. Thank you.
I'm Cindy Sozine, a marine scientist at Cardiff University, and I lead the Maya Ocean effort, an effort to advance paleoclimate science and inclusivity with Miocene temperature data. Human activities have driven CO2 levels to record highs, pushing global warming, with future levels expected to rise even more. To understand how Earth might respond, we look to the past, specifically the Miocene, when CO2 levels were similar to today's. Maya-Ocean is an international project that collects, standardizes, and shares Miocene ocean temperature data to help researchers better understand climate change. By creating an open, accessible database and following FAIR principles, we make the data easy to use for long-term studies. At its core, Maya-Ocean embraces inclusivity and diversity, fostering innovation to tackle future climate changes. What we did, key achievements of the Maya-Ocean project. We made major strides in advancing climate science by integrating diverse proxy methods to provide reliable reconstructions of past ocean conditions. We built a global ocean database of Miocene ocean temperature data ensuring it's freely accessible to researchers worldwide. We standardized and recalibrated existing data to improve accuracy and consistency. And to lower technical barriers, we created an easy-to-use online dashboard and organized global workshops to foster collaboration. A key goal is promoting open science, and we mentored early career researchers, ensuring they have the skills to contribute to future research. MyoOcean also encourages a database mindset for early data standardization. Now, why did we build this Miocene temperature database? Well, understanding past ocean temperature is the key to refining future climate predictions. However, temperature records from this period were fragmented and outdated. To address this, we created a centralized, high-quality database to improve scientific analysis. Our goal was to update and standardize the data while fostering open science and collaboration. By making these records widely accessible, we're enabling researchers from diverse backgrounds to engage with the data, promoting sustainable platforms for long-term climate research. Now, how did we build this temperature database? It was a collaborative effort led by an all-women steering committee, including myself. We held monthly working group sessions and hosted in-person and hybrid workshops to promote global knowledge exchange. The data was compiled from peer-reviewed literature, public repositories, and author contributions, with rigorous quality control measures including recalibration and error checks. A Python-based framework helped automate data validation, and we created a Streamlit dashboard for easy access and hosted the data on OSF with scripts available on GitHub, ensuring ongoing updates and reproducibility while maintaining continuous and community engagement through workshops. Now, we've overcome challenges through collaboration and community support. This has included data fragmentation, inconsistent formats, and limited funding, mainly from small grants. We had to refine and standardize data across different proxies and ensure interdisciplinary collaboration between proxy researchers and age model experts. To address resource constraints, we focused on long-term sustainability, automation, and integration with open repositories. Inclusivity was a priority, especially for underrepresented groups, with a particular emphasis on supporting women in leadership roles. We also implemented open access policies and transparent authorship models to encourage broad participation and recognition. Now, this has its impact on research and me personally. It offers a sustainable open access resource that strengthens the quality and reproducibility of climate research. By standardizing ocean temperature data, it allows for more robust conclusions and fosters interdisciplinary collaboration. And hosting the database and dataset on accessible platforms ensures global researchers can contribute and explore novel insights. Personally, this has led to new networks, expertise, and allows me, as a first-generation Hispanic woman scientist with caring responsibilities, to support inclusivity. My persistence in science is shaped by supportive role models and community, and my aim is to ensure that future Miocene research is both equitable and inclusive. Now, how MyoOcean supports future research? Well, our fair, compliant approach to data compilation and visualization provides a model for large-scale paleoclimate databases. By openly sharing data, methods, and code, we enable replication and expansion of our work. The Streamlit dashboard allows easy exploration of climate data and can be adapted for other datasets. Our inclusive interdisciplinary approach fosters collaboration, and we plan to expand the database even further. MyoOcean will be submitted for publication later in the year, with dashboard and repositories made publicly accessible upon acceptance. Our inclusive interdisciplinary approach fosters collaboration, and we plan to expand the database with additional proxies. MyoOcean will ultimately be submitted for publication, with the dashboard and repositories made publicly accessible upon acceptance. As the leader of the project, I'd like to express my gratitude toward the 50 contributors across 7 working groups for their exceptional expertise and commitment, and my fellow steering committee members, Sevi, Ann, and Alex. Together, we've built something impactful, and this will help drive progress in paleoclimate science moving forward.
Hi, I'm Rachel Sandler, and I'm going to talk about the OpenGHG project. I work within the Atmospheric Chemistry Research Group at the University of Bristol, and for the past few years we've been thinking about how we can make sure that our research is supported in an open and sustainable way. The research field that I work in is in greenhouse gas emissions estimation. For this, there are a broad range of measurement data, including different types from many different networks. This often includes data in many different forms that need to be interpreted in different ways. This includes things like tall towers. We actually have a really strong national network for this in the UK called the DEC network, a European network as well as this called ICOS that we've used in some of our projects. There are flash samples which are taken worldwide, satellites which cover the globe, and also equivalent ground-based stations which look at whole columns in the atmosphere in order to compare to the satellites. For this, we have lots of measurements that look like this, where you sometimes have what's called baseline measurements, and you have these spikes, which tell us about local contributions. From this, we want to be able to produce top-down emissions estimates. So that's emissions estimation, which is informed by these atmospheric measurements. This tells us where these gases are coming from, and also how they may be changing over time. To be able to do this, though, we need complex and diverse data products, including outputs from things like chemical transport models. So we tend to use the Met Office's name model in particular, but there are many models available, and many other groups do use these different models. We use these models because we want to be able to understand where the gases have travelled before being measured. So we want to know what sources could potentially be contributing to these measurements. We also need data such as prior emissions estimates, so that's emissions estimates taken from inventory methods or potentially from models, so those are called bottom-up methods. And those can feed into these atmospheric informed emissions estimates. To create our emissions estimates, we need to understand how these products relate to each other, and we need to be able to connect them together in order to produce robust outputs. So for this, we have created the OpenGHG product. The basis of this is to standardize data. We want to make sure that our data is intercomparable and consistent. And we also want to make sure that this data can be categorized. This means that we'll be able to easily analyze the data and also think about how we can visualize these data products. To do this, the diverse data sets are stored using unique keywords. In this way, the data can be searched and collated. We've done this using open and lightweight tools such as TinyDB and ZAR to make sure that this data is sorted both efficiently and flexibly. We've also aimed as a part of this project to make sure that we incorporate open and software best practice principles, making sure that all of our code is open source and aiming to make this sustainable and maintainable by building things like automated testing frameworks. We've also tried to make sure that collaboration and contribution is well tracked by using tools like Git, and considered how to make sure that people can use the tool and contribute to it by building tutorials. One of the key things we've done as a part of this project is also to make sure that we've incorporated research software engineers right from the start to work alongside researchers. Now, I've worked on both sides of this as a researcher and then transitioning to leading the research software engineering team. It's actually been really useful to have a perspective from both of the sides, including the science and the software. This has allowed us to develop key collaborative practices such as code review and to make sure this is software built for researchers by people who understand research. In this way, we're able to use good principles, but also make sure that it suits the needs of the research and the researchers. And this is not built as a standalone tool which people don't know how to maintain beyond the life of the initial project. This has already been used as a basis for the RHYME model, which is an OpenGHG inversions model to create emissions estimates and uses a Markov chain Monte Carlo approach. Top-down emissions estimations can be produced in many different ways, and so this has been used within the Horizon Paris project when creating intercomparisons between different model outputs. That's a project that spans the whole of Europe and has lots of feed-in from different countries. This is also fed into the UK GEMMA project, and as a part of this, OpenGHG has underpinned the prototype operational emissions evaluation system, and a dashboard has been created to show these results. The ability to create reproducible, traceable and verifiable pipelines means we are aiming to provide researchers and the public with robust, lower latency emissions estimates. In this way, we hope to continue to build a better, more up-to-date understanding of where greenhouse gases are being produced and potentially how to reduce them.
Hello, my name is Josine Min. I'm a senior research fellow in genetic and epigenetic epidemiology at the University of Bristol, and I would like to thank the organizers for shortlisting me for this Open Research Prize. So, in the last 10 years, many genetic factors for complex diseases have been identified. However, we don't know what the functional consequences of those genetic factors are. Using genetic factors of methylation may help to identify the molecular mechanisms underlying those genetic factors associated with disease. In the Genetic of DNA Methylation Consortium, we built like large-scale resources to help uncovering the regulatory effects of genetic factors underlying diseases. We have built an open source infrastructure to identify genetic factors associated with DNA methylation variation across a large number of studies in a harmonized way. So you start off with your genetic data set and your methylation data set, and then the pipeline automatically pre-process and quality controls the data and will calculate the genetic factors of DNA methylation. So we built this infrastructure on GitHub, and all the scripts are publicly available. There's an extensive wiki, so we have made this pipeline modular, which means that there are different modules for pre-processing genetic data, DNA methylation data, calculating covariate data. We have also added additional scripts which were proposed by the community. In July 2024, we had our launch meeting where we released the pipeline to 60 cohorts. And amongst those, 50 of those have now currently run the pipeline. And we have really received fantastic feedback and on running all the scripts. After release, we also had several troubleshoot meetings for cohorts that had different designs or came across different problems, which we then solved amongst the group, but then also using by posting issues on the GitHub repository or on the discussion group on the GitHub pipeline. So we now have summary statistics from 50 cohorts. And the next step is to meta-analyze it, to combine those summary statistics in a large database. This database of the genetic factors of DNA methylation variation will be publicly available. And those genetic factors can also be integrated with other genetic association studies, but also with epigenome-wide association studies. And so we can get more information about the causal pathways of DNA methylation on health outcomes. During the process of building the pipeline and building those databases, we really used an open science approach. And we did that, first of all, to get summary statistics in the most efficient way. Further, by building this pipeline, we really improve the scientific reproducibility and research quality, because each study processes the data in exactly the same way. It also enables collaborations amongst researchers that already know each other, but also people who didn't know each other. So it really encourages like new scientific plans and projects. We also make sure that both the code, like the GitHub pipeline, and also all the summary statistics will be publicly available. And in future, we aim to adopt a pipeline for other purposes. For example, now we currently have run it on European cohorts, but we will also use the script and adopt the pipeline to non-European populations as part of the diverse epigenetic epidemiology partnerships. There are also plans to expand it from blood, for example, to other tissues, for example, saliva. So there's a huge potential to expand it for other projects as well.
Okay, so I think that is the 4 videos for the first prize. And I'd like to say many thanks to all of the shortlistees for those fantastic videos. And it's really evident, although there's one person presenting, all of those pieces of research were conducted by a really wide research team. So we're really, awarding this award to those individuals, but also in recognition of the wider research team that they were supported by. It's been a real tour de force of how open research practices can and are being used to enhance research quality. We've heard about increasing reproducibility, generating, linking and harmonizing valuable open data resources, and wide-scale collaborations with a focus on equality and diversity, all of which is driving truly global research across a range of different disciplines across the GW4 Alliance. So as you can tell, it was really challenging to pick a winner among such strong competition, but we did. I'm delighted to announce that our winner is Rachel Tunnicliffe from the School of Chemistry at the University of Bristol for the project OpenGHG, a community platform for greenhouse gas data science. The panel were deeply impressed with how Rachel and her team were able to evidence the impact of the project and showcase how open research practices improved the quality and reach of the science. By using open research practices, Rachel and the wider team were able to bridge the gap between public engagement and citizen science, enabling the generation of a really high quality open access database for greenhouse gas science, which is already having tangible impacts across Europe. So many, many congratulations to Rachel and the wider team. Okay, so now let's move on to the Widening Reach Prize. This prize is awarded for the use of open research practices to maximise the reach of the research. Entries were scored on the innovation of the methods and their ability to demonstrate how open research practices had enabled access to and use of the research to a wide range of audiences, including but extending beyond academia. We received 30 applications of excellent quality, which I think is testament to how well embedded open research practices have become across the GW4. The panel were deeply impressed with the passion, enthusiasm and commitment shown to opening research and resources across a range of different domains. And we're now going to watch a series of videos from the shortlisted applicants, and hopefully you'll be able to see what a diverse range of fields these shortlisted candidates are from.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Kishore Kumar Jagdishan from University of Bath. I'm thrilled to share about PERC, Predicting Environmental Concentration Risk, our GW4 Open Research Week 2025. PERC is an open source tool tackling pharmaceutical pollution in water, and I'll show you how it works in just 5 minutes. Pharmaceuticals in our rivers are a growing concern, harming ecosystems and public health. Traditional monitoring is costly and often logistically tough. We need efficient, open solutions to predict concentrations and its associated risk towards environmental and human. Here is a PERC as a solution. PERC is an open source art package with an user-friendly, shiny web interface. It predicts pharmaceutical concentrations, PEC, in wastewater, influent, effluent, and rivers. Then also calculate risk quotients based on predicted no-effect concentrations of pharmaceutical, using fully open data sets following FAIR principles. This is how the dashboard looks. As you can see, there are different components in this dashboard, and where we can calculate predicted influent, that's wastewater influent, effluent, and river. And also be able to calculate risk quotient based on predicted environmental concentrations and predicted no effect concentrations. And we also able to see the prescription trends. And we also able to calculate prediction accuracy based on measurement data sets. That means if you have measured data sets, like measured concentrations of influent or effluent or river, PERC help us to visualize those as well in addition to prediction. And also be able to compare these measured concentrations against predicted to get the prediction accuracy. In addition, the PERC also help us to calculate, visualize parent versus metabolite and renewal efficiency if you have measured concentrations. As I mentioned earlier, the PERC have different data components. It involves prescription per wastewater treatment plant catchment, and it has a wastewater treatment plant renewal efficiencies, and it has information about pharmaceuticals metabolism and excretion factors, and it has river flow data specific to our catchment. So getting all these localized site-specific informations, PERC helps to improve the predictions. As you can see from this plot, this box plot with different points, and each corresponds to a prescription of a particular pharmaceutical in a month. across 5 different catchments, A, B, C, and D and D. And you can see the crossed one is the prescription of the same pharmaceutical at the sampling month. And you can see how there is a huge variation of this prescription of a particular compound, in this case, ibuprofen and carbamazepine, across the sites and different months. Most of the prediction tools use national level, yearly average, and Prana and PERC use prescription per month on the particular catchment. So this means it helps to improve the prediction accuracy. And as I said, in this Southwest England-based studies, among the 41 drugs, we're able to show more than 70% of our measurements and predictions are aligned well. And in terms of risk quotient, we're able to see the risk quotient based on predicted and the risk quotient based on actual measurements are aligning strongly, like 86%. So this helped to showcase the accuracy of prediction using the PERC. Yeah, the PERC, why? It helps us for trend analysis and also for comparative analysis and also for risk assessment. And it helps to go for seamless data integration from multiple data sets. And it has an efficient predictive analysis. And we are also able to get publication ready downloads from the tool. And talk about impact, PERC is one of the top 40 downloaded. Then it is initially released in January 23. And it has been used by different academic settings, like in University of Bath. And also we are currently developing a separate version of PERC for an environmental agency. And PERC can help for policymakers to get informed regulations on pharmaceutical usage, on finding hotspots, so that we're able to reduce potential harm caused by these pharmaceuticals. Yeah, still there are data gaps over the counter pharmaceuticals and also patient adherence. But we are aiming to scale it globally faster and make it more smarter environmental production through continuous collaborations and refining the models. Overall, we're trying to develop a tool so that fit for all and able to replicate framework for global environmental monitoring and trying to reduce the time and effort required for environmental risk assessment using the open science research. I'd like to thank my team in Bath and my collaborators at Essex Water Bath and Environmental Agency for their kind support and all the funding bodies involved in this. Thank you so much for listening.
Hello. Today, I'd like to introduce you to Advances in Geochemistry and Cosmochemistry, a new Diamond Open Access journal recently launched and created by 54 members of the geochemistry community, and for which I'm acting as coordinating executive editor. So, what is AGC? Well, being a Diamond Open Access journal, this means that it is both free to read and free to publish, but also authors retain copyrights on their publication. Critically, it is both run and led by the geochemistry community without any support from a for-profit publisher, and publishes multiple types of manuscripts from original research to review articles and technical notes. You can see all our guidance and editorial policy documents, as well as check out the members of the editorial team on our website www.agcj.org. But the real question is, why is it needed at all? The geochemistry and cosmochemistry is amongst the largest, if not the largest field in geosciences. But yet, the vast majority of journals operate either as full open access or hybrid subscription open access publications with significant article processing charges, or APCs. Looking at available data from 2018 and 2019, we can see that the mean APCs for all journals in our field are around $1,700 to $1,800, but they reach well over $3,000 in cases of hybrid journals. This is particularly significant as hybrid journals tend to be the most reputable journals in the field, and they are critical in knowledge creation, career development, and progression. APCs, by shifting the open access financial burden to authors, funding agencies, and institutions, thus create a new barrier. Currently, only one society-owned journal in geochemistry and cosmochemistry operates as a Diamond Open Access journal, but it only accepts short-format articles. AGC seeks to fill this gap and offer a free alternative for long-format articles. So how did this come together? Well, it took us 2 years, from initial discussions between a group of 7 mid-career scientists to the launch of the journal. Initial work focused on consultation with other Diamond Open Access journals, as well as community at large and the major learned societies in our field. And this was to narrow down the contours of the journals, as well as to recruit our core executive and technical teams. A hosting deal with University of Uppsala Publication was secured in October 2023, from which then our work focused on building the infrastructure. After drafting the editorial policies and other guidance documents, our website opened in May 2024. This then led to a second recruitment round in the summer and autumn of 2024, particularly for handling editors, as well as the rest of our technical teams, and finally led to the launch of the journal in January 2025. The challenges along the way have been many, particularly technical in the selection of the right host for the journal, giving us the base support that we needed while allowing us the freedom to build our journal the way we thought was best. In terms of organizational challenges, we dealt with those by consulting with the community early and often to devise robust processes, maintaining balance between skills, workload, and international reputations, while also achieving the diversity commitments that we set ourselves. In terms of organizational, again, this consultation allowed us to consult with community experts when it came to best practice for data curation, as well as our designing of our peer review processes. Finally, we navigated reputational challenges by engaging with Learned Society's executive board to explain what AGC is and its aims, and also how they could support us. We also built a team responsible for designing and implementing a communication strategy to spread awareness about the journal across the community. We are very proud of having brought AGC to existence, and we are very excited about its future. Bringing 54 scientists together from every corner of our field has been extremely rewarding for everyone, particularly in bringing about a broader understanding of the field to its board members. But most of all, it really emphasized that journals are not just about articles, they are also about community building. 2 months after opening, we have already received 10 submissions, which is really exciting. Our 5-year aim is to make AGC a credible alternative journal on par with well-established journals in the field. Overall, we hope that AGC will be participating towards more equitable participation in knowledge production, which will be of inevitable benefit to the community. On behalf of everyone involved in AGC, thank you very much for your attention today.
I'm delighted to announce that RAM's adopting a new open access strategy, so we'll be releasing over the coming months hundreds of our images for the public to use. It's a project we've been working on over the last year with the GW4 Lab and the Digital Humanities Lab at the University of Exeter.
For the Open Access program, RAM is using the CC0 Creative Commons public domain dedication tool. It's a license that tells the public that the images are free of all rights and they can be reused without permission.
As a researcher, I'm working on clarifying the legal status of works in RAM's collection so that these images could be released into the public domain. I found the whole research enjoyable because we get to see a wide range of creative works that the public can get to use.
So the Digital Humanities Lab, we're working with the RAM and the GW4 Lab, and one of the things we're looking to digitise in the upcoming months is some of these fabulous textiles in the RAM collection. Textiles are a real challenge to digitise because they are made to be worn. So then how do you digitise those if they're not on a model, on a person? It's a really interesting challenge and we're really looking forward to that.
We use a process called photogrammetry, which involves taking a large number of photos of an object from lots of different angles. It allows us to capture a lot of detail in objects. We're really looking forward to carrying on working with RAM, producing more 3D models of parts of their collection, so hopefully there'll be lots more models available to view soon.
Over the next year, we'll be clearing copyright on a number of RAM's images. These images are in the public domain and will be available for anyone to use however they'd like. The images will be both 2D and 3D and will be hosted on a number of different platforms, including Wikimedia Commons and Sketchfab. We'll also be holding a number of events and promotions over the next year to launch the images.
We're really excited to see the results of the work, and we're going to see the way that these images are being used by our audiences, RAM's audiences, all across the globe.
So hi everybody, thank you for shortlisting us for this great prize, GW4 Open Research Prize 2025. We are here as a team, and I'm Katerina Kauri. I'm a reader in applied mathematics at the School of Mathematics at Cardiff University, and my other team members will introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Thomas Woolley. I'm also a reader in mathematics.
Hello, I'm Wasim Jabi, and I'm a professor of computational methods in architecture at the Welsh School of Architecture.
Hello, I'm Yidan Xue. I'm a postdoc at the University of Manchester, and I was a postdoc at Cardiff University.
So why did we do this work? Our overall area is creating open tools for managing epidemics. As we know very well, COVID-19 has wreaked havoc in our lives a few years back now, but there are multiple airborne diseases, SARS, MERS, influenza, and the common cold. So most of these diseases are carried through aerosols, which are suspended in the air for hours and travel long distances. So policymakers during the pandemic had to take very fast decisions to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, and they needed good scientific input. After COVID-19, we started working on more sophisticated tools on preparedness for future epidemics, and this led to VIRIS, which is a new modeling framework and web app to inform policy for indoor spaces. So this is good for policymakers, but it's also good for architectural consultants and space managers. So this led to VIRIS, which stands for Virtual Infection Risk Indoor Simulator. As mentioned already, this is an open modeling framework and also a web app, and it combines airborne transmission, people movement, and architectural design. And the big overarching question in our work is how long can you stay in a room before getting infected?
So Topologic Pi is an open source and freely available research tool, and it's really revolutionizing how we model and analyze architectural buildings. At its core, Topologic Pi provides a lightweight but powerful framework for spatial analysis, spatial reasoning, and helps with computational design.
So as you come to VIRIS, this will be your landing screen. And so we have these three case studies that we've looked at, specifically care home, supermarket, and courtroom. But we also have the ability to import previous scenarios, if you've worked on them, or build your own using Topological Pi to generate any geometry that you're interested in. But we're just going to have a look at the care home. So when we go into one of these, it gives you a brief overview of all the parameters that are set, but these can be changed. So initially we have the geometry, we have the events. So the events are, you pick a location in your geometry, and these are the places where things happen. So you can start in the bedroom, you can go to the common rooms, and in the schedule, you start to build these timetables up for people. So where are they is the event column, what they're doing, and you say where they start, at what time they end. From there, you can then say who has these schedules, and then you can pick whether they're infectious, whether they're wearing masks, are they super spreaders, and then once we have that, we can then start setting physical parameters. So what is the ventilation like? What diseases? We can do any disease. Currently, we're just built for COVID-19, but as long as we have the parameters, it can easily be updated. And we set the simulation parameters. Once they're all in, we can check and run. And once again, it tells you all the parameters that you should need. You run the simulation, and it will give you, you start the animation, a nice little graphic of who's getting infected and when.
Yep, so using this modeling framework and the web app, we can study different government guidelines and their impact on reducing the infection risk of the group of people we're studying. We can compare different interventions and inform future guidelines.
And just to conclude, we are going to continue working with policymakers, space managers, and architects as a team. We are going to be keeping the open science ethos we apply throughout our work to date. So thank you very much, and feel free to contact us in these emails at Cardiff University. Thank you.
So many thanks to all the shortlistees for those videos. I think, as you can see, it was a real tour de force of excellence. I mean, they were so impressive. It was really hard to kind of to judge. The impact and reach of each project was really clearly evident, from using open research methods to generate tools from water monitoring or modelling viral transmission, to creating new diamond open access journals in fields where that's currently been lacking, which is something close to my heart and is a true labour of love. The panel were full of praise for all of the shortlistees, but we can only have one winner, and I can announce that the winner is Andrea Wallace with Francesca Farmer from the University of Exeter, in partnership with Michael Weinberg from NYU Law. And this is for the project, the GLAM Lab, Building More Sustainable Networks, Pathways and Infrastructures for Open Access to Cultural Heritage Collections. So from the video, you will have seen that the GLAM Lab partners with smaller and less well-resourced cultural institutions and community organisations to research emerging issues in allowing them to make their artworks and cultural heritage pieces open access. So they use innovative strategies to design ways of supporting open access in the cultural sector. Their work has really bridged the gap between client representation and research-informed advocacy to produce more sustainable and scalable open access policies and guidance for low-cost uptake by others. So the panel were really deeply impressed by this innovative approach and the interdisciplinarity of this endeavour and the work to open up cultural heritage collections by using legal frameworks and legal support to enable smaller, less well-resourced institutions to open up their collections for both research and the public. We were highly impressed by the evidence that this work can and is already being used worldwide and is already having wide-reaching impact for academia and beyond. So many, many congratulations to Andrea, Francesca and Michael and their team, a truly inspiring piece of work. And I'd just like to congratulate all the shortlisted applicants. It was a real joy, as I've said before, to judge these. And we were really inspired and humbled by the quality of open research work that is going on across the GW4. So I'll pass you back now to, I think it's over to Alice now.
Hi, thank you so much, Kate. And yeah, again, a very big thank you to everyone who submitted. It was incredibly difficult for our judges. Kate and I witnessed them wringing their hands over it. So really well done, everyone. I'm absolutely thrilled to announce that we are done early. So I don't know if Julie would like to make any concluding remarks, but otherwise I think the last thing to do is just to thank everyone for being here, and thanks especially to all the folks who helped make this happen, such as Kate and Julie, Marcus and Joe. And big shout out to Kate and Sophie, who helped behind the scenes to make everything go so smoothly. So thank you so much. And Julie, I'll give you the last word.
Okay, thanks. Well, I will just add my thanks to yours, Al. Thank you. So great display of open research practices. Lots of people submitted. Well done to all of those for doing that. And congratulations to those that were shortlisted, and to the 2 award winners and the teams that they represented. Thanks, Kate, and the other judges. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Marcus. And to everyone here, do look at the comments in the chat. There's been a lot of interesting bits of information exchange there. And of course, look out for the videos of all of the events for GW4 Open Research Week. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the time, the half an hour back of your day that you've got as well. So thanks, everyone, very much. Bye-bye then.
Thank you.
Everyone, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, cheerio.